Well, welcome and thank you for taking part in our series of interviews on the Cultural Master Plan for 2016. Sarah Hexby, my first question for you is, can you tell us a bit about what you do for a living and for recreation, including what types of artistic and cultural activities you currently participate in?
Right. This is a time limited thing, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh,
My
so,
last interview was Simon David, and he could have gone,
uh,
or Simon James, he could
yeah.
have gone on for hours on that.
Okay, so starting with work.
Mm-hmm.
So, for my employment on Bowen Island, I work as the community school coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I enjoy the work, which involves the community school, and occasionally creating arts projects with the students and the community in collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of activities do I participate in? I'm a dancer, musician, visual artist, textile artist who also writes.
So, and you're a member of the Black Sheep.
I'm a member of the Bowen Island Black Sheep Morris Dancers.
Mm-hmm. And you're also a writer, did you say?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You have to tell me a little bit more about that. Um, all right, so starting with the questions, tell us the story of one or two, if you want, of your most memorable cultural or artistic experiences on Bowen Island, either as performer, participant, amateur, reader, listener, or audience member.
Well, one of the most memorable experiences was attending the art shows of oil paintings at Collins Farm that Iona Betty McIntyre used to put on. And she was a painting mentor in the
Mm-hmm.
community. And in 2006, which was about 7 years after she passed away, I was contracted to curate and run one of the Fields of Magic exhibits.
Wow.
And so that involved putting large hand painted oil paintings out in the fields around the Heritage Farmhouse for the community to come and see an outdoor exhibition of her work. And she really wanted to make fine art accessible to the community as well as really engaging the place of Bowen Island because it was one of her sources of creativity.
Terrific. The word that we're hearing over and over in a lot of these interviews is public art.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's the weather that puts a lot of people off. How did the weather work for you in this particular case?
Well, we lucked out weather-wise, but she had hand-sewn and hand-made a bunch of clear plastic covers that could be slipped over the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the rain, you could enjoy the paintings in a different way, looking through the plastic at the paintings.
Terrific. So this involved the kids as well,
Um,
or this was kind of mostly for the whole community.
It was for the whole community. Yeah. So there was it was advertised. There was a map leading to the farm, and then you could just wander around the fields around the house and look at the paintings that were in cedar frames that were in the ground supporting the artwork. So rather than being on a gallery wall, she was taking fine art that also did show in galleries,
Mm-hmm.
and also just having an open air outdoor exhibition. So
Terrific.
not a permanent installation, just a temporary one.
Yeah, great. Have you got any stories that you could share about your experiences with kids? Because most of our stories so far have been for adults.
Okay, well, creating artwork with youth is one of the best parts of my job. Right now we're working on the Bix Earth Labyrinth, which is a ceramic art installation project. All 325 students are working with local ceramic artist Susanna Montague and are creating clay hemispheres that are going to be artworks that are their reflections on their connection to Bowen Island. They've been getting presentations on the basic geology of Bowen Island and how our clay deposits, including 68 acres of rare blue clay that was mined out of Mannion Bay in the 1880s and used to build a good portion of Gastown and Vancouver buildings, is part of our island's history. So we're taking a bit of that clay, and
There's still some left,
there's a lot of clay on Bowen Island still.
but the blue stuff?
There's quite a bit of the blue stuff left.
Oh, great. That's terrific.
So we're adding that into clay that's been purchased so that it's safe to go through the firing process. And the kids are making their own artworks, and there'll be 325 pieces in this art installation, which the students will set up and have open to the community.
Fantastic.
To celebrate Earth Day.
So this is Earth Day 2016?
This is Earth Day 2016, yeah.
It's terrific.
And it's great to connect the Bowen Island history to the youthful inspiration in creating artwork.
Yeah. I was privileged to recently go and visit with one of the Mud Girls. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
The Mud Girls, yes.
Yeah. They're awesome. So they're going to teach us a workshop, and we're going to put together a combination bus shelter and market stand on the Grafton lands.
Excellent.
Later this year.
Well, and if you can in some way include youth in that project.
That's the plan. So
and it's,
I'm telling you about it now, and
excellent.
I'm going to keep telling you about
well,
it.
Perfect. And that's the great thing about having the community school is building the community connections between the students and keeping them active in the community so that we can maintain our volunteer base and maintain having an active, engaged community. And I guess one of the reasons why I was inspired to create the Ceramic Earth Day project was because one of my earliest art memories from elementary school was when clay artist Susan Clark, who still does pottery today through Vonago, she came to the school and demonstrated how to throw a pot. And she not only threw a pot, she also splattered the entire wall of the multi-purpose room, or the room she was in, with clay. And I just thought it was so great that somehow art could allow for all this creative mess and fun and enthusiasm. And so I try to create projects that get the kids as fired up, let them really get hands-on, messy, and engaged with their learning. Yeah,
I went down to Portland to take a look at the village building convergence down there, where they have a day each year, or 2 days each year, where they do all these community-based things, and the kids are involved in, of course, the cob building and straw bale stuff. So they're stomping in the mud. They just have a ball doing it. And in many cases, they're producing really useful structures. Yeah. Soundproofing and so on structures around their schools and so on. And they can come out every day and say, "We did that."
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe you could do one of these hemispheres at really giant size, and we could use it as a performing arts space on Bowen.
Well, sure.
I'll get working on a commission for that right away.
Sounds good. Anything at this point.
All right. What is the greatest challenge you face, or you think artists face, here on Bowen?
We are lacking, it depends on which artist you speak to.
Well, in your own sense of priority, what do you think?
My own sense of priority, I really think it's a shame that we don't have a more full-bodied cultural center on the island. We have the gallery at Artisan Square, which is a great stopgap. We have, some independent spaces, but it's just really a shame that we don't have one big community space that's really got culture as its primary designation. Or it doesn't have to be its only designation, it can be multi-use, but I think it needs to be a primary location.
Right.
And the community school gym, which has functioned as the multi-use recreational space, is great, but it's, you know, as it says on the sign, outside of the community school and recreation center. And we've had plays there in the past, which was easier to do when we didn't have as many recreational needs. But we've never really had a designated space that's designed specifically for the island's cultural needs. It's always been the creative challenge that has led to some fantastic creative solutions, but the expenditure of energy in creating those creative solutions, like renting Camp Bow Isle and then getting a bus and shuttling people up the muddy road to get to the play that's they've had to build the stage in, that they have to take the stage down. Yes, that would be one of the bigger challenges.
For sure. Yeah. How do you find the school district? Is it like a lot of schools are kind of cutting out all the arts all over the place? How is your school district in terms of providing challenges to arts education?
Bowen Island Community School and the West Vancouver School District I don't see any diminishment of our cultural enrichment programs for the students. If anything, there's increased opportunities. We have, in the 8 years that I've been at the school, there are more music programs and more arts opportunities and more things going on at the Kay Meek Center in West Vancouver, and more students creating movies and doing, various projects that have personal expression inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. So I'd say there's a trend of students being more culturally engaged, and the schools and the teachers being responsive to that. And I haven't seen a diminishment.
Right. Hope it works its way up to the high school level, because that's apparently where it becomes more of a challenge.
Didn't you see the poster for the Bowen Island students that just created that incredible movie? I'll tell you about that more after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me make a reminder. So I'll come back to that. Okay. What is holding you back from participating? I don't even know if you could participate more in artistic and creative activities. Is there anything that is holding you back?
Not enough hours in the day, and perhaps channeling a bit too much of my creative energy into my job, but I love my job enough that I consider it a worthwhile investment creatively and in my community. What's holding me back from more creative and artistic? Just time, mostly.
Number one answer to that question. When you think of arts and culture on Bowen, what person or place comes first to mind?
What person or place? First to mind? Okay, now I'm mulling it over, which isn't first to mind, is it?
No, that's fine. Take your time. Is there someone or something that you think is our greatest cultural asset?
Historically, I'd have to answer Lieben, the artist enclave that the Nielsen's helped to create. Currently, I can't just name one person or one thing.
All right.
I'd have to answer something like the youth of the island, the cultural fabric of the island.
Okay, let me explore that, because you've been here long enough and immersed in this enough. What would you describe as Bowen's culture? How would you?
Well, it has definitely changed over the years. I was born in the early 70s, so I got to see.
And you've lived here all your life?
I've lived here all my life.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So I'll ask you the question about when you moved to Bowen. When
I moved to Bowen,
All right. So, sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to talk about the cultural fabric.
The cultural fabric.
How it's changed.
How it's changed? Well, I mean, it's just more expensive to live on the island. And over the years, I have noticed that as it's become more expensive and as there are fewer places to create art on the island due to costs, um, that lack of studio space is a definite challenge. When the property prices started to rise in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a large exodus of some of our more creative population. That there was a big chunk of people that moved to Salt Spring. There's some that have moved to different islands and different smaller communities. So we've had a lot of artists leave
Mm-hmm.
over the years that in a very noticeable manner, creating,
Right.
sort of holes in our
Mm-hmm.
community. And some new artists have moved to the island and filled in the gaps, but the cultural fabric, it's sort of, we go along, some people leave, other people join in. The population's been growing significantly. When I was a kid, I really did know everyone on the island pretty much, if not by name, by sight.
Right.
And there were empty classrooms at Vix when it was first opened because there
Wow.
weren't enough students for those classrooms. And since then, there's been 2 large additions to the school.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were about 11 to 14 kids in my grade when I went through to grade 7. And then just 5 years later, with my sister's graduating class, there were 3 classes
Wow.
of students. So there's been
It's funny, the demographics here, because the average age of Bowen Islanders is about 5 years older than the average age of Vancouverites.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that fact, we have like one of the highest concentrations of school kids.
We do. In the 2006 census, I think we were in the top 3 communities in Canada for growing, and also had amongst the highest ratio of under 5-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
in the as far as a ratio goes of population. Also, I've heard recently we have one of the higher percentages of PhDs. So,
That's,
the island.
that's a mixed blessing.
It's, well, so yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Culturally, what do you think most differentiates us from Vancouver?
Culturally, we are differentiated by our quirkiness at best of times, our love of slugs, our love of island life, our love of the environment, our wildlife. Well, the gardeners have a love-hate relationship with deer, and the artists are generally quite inspired by the island. I think there's the sense of being separate from Vancouver. But we are close to Vancouver somehow defines us, because it's a decision to leave the island to go into the city. And so somehow that encapsulation of being on an island helps to give us a sense of definition and community.
Right.
And then there are the things, that only on Bowen factor, that's not just in the arts, but also, in the community in general, the sense that we'll help each other in some way, or somehow we are connected. If someone's stranded in Horseshoe Bay and maybe you don't know someone's name, but you would help them out. And I think that's in the arts as well as the community in general. If somebody wants some paints or something, put something out on the forum, they're more likely to have someone on the island will, share their resources and share what they have.
Pencils.
Or their colored pencils, or, when I was doing some crocheting with, and I was looking for homespun wool, a bag of Bowen Island sheep wool showed up on my doorstep with a, thought you would like this. Or, if I heard of someone looking for something, if I had it in my collection, I'd probably be more likely to share it with them than, on Bowen Island. And say in the city, I don't think I'd be as comfortable just going up to someone's door and hanging something on it.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in their interview that it was the only place they can imagine where they had occasion when their son or daughter forgot their lunch They ran to the ferry, and the ferry was already leaving.
Yep.
So they took the pack that was in, and they just hurled it onto the ferry and shouted, "Get this to whatever the name of the son or daughter is," and it had no problem. It was delivered no problem to that.
Yeah. So
that person.
I think in the arts we're pretty supportive of each other's endeavors too, in a great way.
It's also the only place that you can buy get case lots of mangoes. Did you hear about that? Case lots of mangoes in the Cove.
Hey, I traded some of those mangoes for doing. I patched up the sweater of the person who was selling the mangoes in exchange for some mangoes.
Oh, that's...
It's the textile art thing.
You have those kinds of skills. You have to be careful. Kim will sign you up for our Fix-It fairs.
Well, I don't know. Are they doing sewing at the Fix-It fairs?
Oh, yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Sewing and mending?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
They're doing anything that needs to be fixed. They're doing that.
There we go. Well, I learned how to, the traditional art of darning socks from an elderly woman who lived in a log cabin when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always happy to pass on the skills I learned from my elders growing up on Bowen to youth today.
Great.
So there we go.
So the next question you kind of addressed, number 6, in terms of our culture, what's changed the most since you've arrived? Or what do you see changing the most right now? You're saying primarily it's affordability issues and demographic shifts that come as a result of that.
And some volunteer burnout. That's a perennial issue.
Right.
But, you know, I find it somewhat... one of the things that I'd like to help change around is that, you know, I started out on working on the, trying to get the community center, and I was on the committee when I think I was 17 years old with Paul Husen, who started it with the Cultural Dream Team through the Arts Council, and at that point I was the youth representative.
Wow.
And I find it somewhat distressing that I'm at these meetings and some of the people are still the same and I'm still considered the youth representative. I'm like, no, I am not anymore. I am part of the middle-aged demographic now.
Yeah.
And we really need to get youth engaged. And yes, so.
Well, it's taken us 5 years in transition, the transition movement, to get our first person under 30 onto our 14.
And that comes back to the affordability and time thing. If there isn't enough affordability, people can't afford the time to give it as volunteers, and then there's the inclination. You also have to have a community that creates the culture of giving back and volunteerism. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The volunteer burnout. We've been reviewing a bunch of other cultural plans from other communities, and it's come up in at least 10 communities that are dealing with that. The latest one I reviewed was in the Nanaimo's cultural plan. It was really interesting. One person said, "The thing you need to understand about culture in the Nanaimo is that our culture is outdoors." And I just thought it was a magnificent kind of realization that applies equally to us.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that a lot of people mention the gallery as kind of their first place that they think about. But if you look at the artistic and cultural activities people actually are engaged in, going to indoor art galleries is not at the top of the list.
It's a part of it, but yeah, in our culture is also, you know, the conversations on the ferry.
Exactly.
And in coffee shops and on the paths and trails and going out and seeing that somebody's, you know, gone to the beach and they've been at the beach swimming long enough that they've picked out all of a certain color of stones and done little piles of them. Sort of that interacting with our landscape, intuitive artwork installations that occur down on the beach.
Right.
So that's also part of our culture.
I've just been talked into talk about volunteer burnout, volunteering for the Heritage Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are on that commission are all about heritage designation.
Yeah.
And they want to inventory and designate heritage spots. And I said, well, why don't you why don't we start by looking at engendering enthusiasm and interest in our heritage first before we try to lock down what we've got. Because most people have no idea and they don't particularly care about heritage. So I said, maybe we could do something with the Arts Council where we're supposedly working on or have some semblance of a cross-island trail. Maybe we could have a complete set of arts installations all the way along that trail.
I'm glad that idea has come up. I proposed that when they first put in the Trans Island Trail, and I had a whole proposal in to have basically a public art walk across the island on the Trans Island Trail. And that floated around and didn't go anywhere. So I'd love to see somebody pick up that idea and run with it. And I'd love to help create some artwork.
Maybe we'll get you to pick it up as well. Not by yourself, but with some support.
No, but I'd be happy to contribute. I would still like to, I've always wanted to have a big public art piece on Bowen Island of a gigantic slug. Like those world largest sculptures.
Right.
Something that celebrates our quirkiness and our island's unofficial mascot, and that is fun, that celebrates the fun elements of our community. Right. Public art can be fun and quirky, and a good part of Bowen Island culture is, the old send-off at Labor Day, with people going and men dressing up in dresses and going down in trucks to wave off the tourists at the end of summer, and the old truck races going backwards up Main Street, and those traditions have gone by the wayside, but we're still at just over 40 years of holding annual slug races, and why not celebrate that? I mean, that not only celebrates our local culture, but also generates tourism, because who wouldn't want a photo of themselves beside the Bowen Island slug?
Well, they go take photos beside those laughing faces in the West End.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By the thousand, you can't.
They do, and it's
so. Yeah,
and it's that outdoor cultural engagement, public art.
Yeah.
So, whether you like it or not, if it provokes a reaction, it's.
Well, I'm glad to hear that mentioned. We're finally getting the Arts Council to acknowledge it as being one of the top 3 projects for the next year.
The public
art in general. Mm-hmm. They're not quite sure what it means, but they've heard it often enough that they're saying we need to do something with it. So maybe some doors are opening. If you is there any particular type of artistic or cultural activity you'd like to learn more about, if only you knew who on Bowen to ask, or do you know everybody on Bowen?
No, I don't know everyone on Bowen. I'd like there to be some more cultural, social mixers. I find that going to the gallery sometimes, I don't know some of the artists now, and there have been a lot of new artists moving to the island, and it would be great to connect more.
Yeah.
And have some sort of open forum or opportunity to say, to make those connections. We did an open forum for the Bowen Ag Alliance a few years ago, and we thought maybe it would be great if 12 people came and 75 people came and just sort of shared what they were interested in. So I think that would be great if something like that could happen. And
one of the
what
things
would I like to learn about? I would like to learn how to make the largest slug sculpture possible. I've done some casting and mold making, but learning how to make full-size public artworks and what that takes. I'd be up for learning about that.
All right.
Can we have a bronze casting or some sort of foundry on Bowen?
Be interesting to find out. Yeah, one of the thrusts that we're hearing in these interviews is people are saying, the Arts Council should not be just about professional artists and enabling them to try to make a living on Bowen. It's pretty hard to actually make a full living.
I don't think that's the mandate of the Arts Council. And I always love it when people say, this group should do this or shouldn't do this. Yeah. When this group of people is probably a group of volunteers that are already running to capacity and can only do so much because they also have full-time families, full-time jobs,
Right.
and they do what they
Yeah.
can. And I always say to people when they think that somebody should be doing something is, why aren't you doing it?
Right.
If you're that fired up about it, rather than
And
trying to push other people to do it, join the
Yeah.
board, start a new board.
And you can do stuff on Bowen. We're small enough.
Yeah.
There's little enough red tape compared to some areas,
Compared to some areas.
but you can actually, if you've got the energy and the time, you can actually do stuff yourself.
You can come up with an
Put up your
idea,
own-
communicate it.
Put
Some
up
people-
posters.
Put up posters, yep. 25 posters will cover the whole community and more.
That's for sure. So what we're hearing is that in addition to helping to support the different kinds of artists, what we can do pretty easily using social media is enable people who just want to learn or get together with other people that have the same artistic or cultural interests to just do so. And some of that's happening on some of the various Facebook posts now, but it's still a lot, or Facebook groups now, but still a lot of those Facebook groups are about transactions. They're not about, we've got probably over 100 people on Bowen who like taking pictures of birds.
Yep.
So let's have an event where you don't have to be a professional photographer. Everybody who wants to take pictures of birds, let's get together with somebody who knows a lot about birds and knows where they are, and have them lead us to the right place, and then get together for drinks afterwards and compare what we know.
Well, sounds like that's the event you're going to be putting together.
Probably, yeah. All right, well, I can't ask you what brought you to Bowen Island, because presumably it was your parents.
Well, you can ask me what's kept me here, because that's the unusual thing, is that I was born here, but the greatest challenge has been to try to figure out how to stay here. And it was a conscious decision. I could have moved off the island at many different points to do many different things, and to make significantly more money than I have made in my 20s, when it was a struggle, and my resume is highly diverse, as I just did whatever I could to stay on the island as an artist and get studio space and keep painting and sculpting and writing. And when I graduated from high school, I wanted to test myself as an artist, and I'd written a play. So after high school, I took a year off and produced a play and wrote a novel. And, but it was challenging to figure out how to stay on the island. So what's kept me on the island? I don't know. It's my home. And
So you asked another question, which is probably as interesting as why did you stay, is how did you stay?
How did I stay?
If you were to provide advice to somebody who would like to stay but is just finding it, unaffordable, too difficult to get work and so on, what would you suggest?
Talk to people. Don't just give up. Try to ask or find what you need with